And kill one and kill one. And kill one and kill one. And kill one and kill one.
So, and the way that he describes what we've been discussing in terms of academia, he writes that against Freud, this perception says that one should assert the conceptual and ethical primacy of melancholy. In the process of loss, there is always a remainder which cannot be integrated through the work of mourning, and the ultimate fidelity is fidelity to this remainder. Mourning is a kind of betrayal, the second killing of the lost object, while melancholic subject remains faithful to the lost object, refusing to renounce his or her attachment to it.
And his example of this is quite interesting, or one of his examples is in the postmodern era, one's relationship to one's own cultural or ethnic roots.
Mm-hmm.
That at the point where cultural and ethnic groups enter capitalist modernization and are under threat, that their specific legacy will be swallowed up by the new global order, they should not renounce their tradition through mourning, but retain their melancholic attachment to their lost roots.
And I think we'd be doing a kind of American academia style pretending if we didn't acknowledge that this is clearly how a lot of people view their identity at this moment.
And Marx talks about this in the Communist Manifesto, the way that capitalism sweeps away the old traditions and the old forms. Žižek points out that the kind of X that's instantiated by this erasure of old forms, expressed through his example of Malcolm X, who instead of adopting another name in place of his slave name, put an X, which Zizek points out is kind of the universal function, like this that stands in for these.
So rather than an acknowledgement of a lost, like something lost, it's an instantiation of we'll get
lack.
to it, but a lack.
You know, because this is Zizek's point about subjectivity as well, is that it doesn't have to do with the stuff that's supposed to fill in the subject. It's the lack in the subject that that cuts across in a universalizing way. Zizek points out that like the rootlessness of today's subject coincides with the kind of ontological rootlessness of subjectivity itself, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same dynamic that Marx was talking about with capitalism. Like, yes, capitalism sweeps away the old forms, but in doing so, it creates the class of its own gravediggers.
Yeah, and now we're just affirming the very loss that coincides with capitalism, right? Like rather than trying to like account like Malcolm X, kind of like accept the impasse of our identity in the present and history. There's through the loss that comes along with, or the loss of those traditions that comes along with capitalism, we're like still playing that game. We're following that loss and trying to access it rather than adopting a different way forward.
Okay, maybe we can get to the text now.
Maybe just to link this conversation to what Žižek writes, he says, melancholy is thus an exquisitely postmodern stance, the stance that allows us to survive in a global society by maintaining the appearance of fidelity to our lost roots.
Damn, that's a good point.
Okay, so what's awry here? What's theoretically wrong with this assertion of melancholy?
The mistake of the melancholic, Zizek points out, is to treat the lost object as if it has a positive existence of its own. So there's a basic confusion between loss and lack.
Right.
Insofar, Zizek writes, as the object cause of desire is originally in a constitutive way lacking, melancholy interprets this lack as a loss, as if the object lacking were once possessed and then lost.
We lost a thing, but for Žižek, or in this kind of ideological stance, we lost something cohesive, something accessible,
like a tradition, our roots. We've lost our roots. Well, I think it's really interesting the distinction here between loss and lack, the distinction between loss of a coherent positive thing, one's roots, etc., between that and something that is constitutively lacking, something that was lacking, that is lacking now and was lacking then.
Well, like I think we can make the observation that it's rather than a lost kind of cohesive, true existence, Zizek is promoting lack, but he's doing it like there is a theoretical underpinning to that because of the way that desire is structured.
Yeah, but before we get to desire, here's a nice quote. Melancholy obfuscates the fact that the object is lacking from the very beginning, that its emergence coincides with its lack, and that this object is nothing but the positivization of a void/lack, and in that sense is purely anamorphic and does not exist in itself.
Yeah. Because it's the very presence of an absence that the melancholic is fixated on. It possesses it in its very loss itself.
So it's like in some ways it doesn't exactly matter what the object is, and yet it's only possible through the object.
Right.
So there's a little shout out to Graham Greene, which I thought was nice because I've never seen him write about him before.
We've both recently read Graham Greene books.
All right.
But you read that book, right?
I read like half of it. Honestly, not very good, but
I have it on my kitchen counter, but Peter said it's not very good, so I'm probably not going to read it.
I believe I called it frivolous, and I stand by that.
The Third Man is really good.
That's great. Okay, so there's a kind of paradox here. I'm not sure if we said this quote, but the deceitful translation of a lack into a loss enables us to assert our possession of the object. What we never possess can also never be lost. The melancholic, in his unconditional fixation of the lost object, in a way possesses it in its very loss. There's not even the desire if we think of the lost tradition, there's not fully the desire to like exist completely within it, but the desire to hold on to it as something that you've lost.
Yeah.
And then it also refuses to like come to terms with, for one thing, that sort of deadlock there, antagonism.
It's
but
like
also it refuses to find it doesn't want to find a way out of it. And
yeah, it's like that horrible YouTube video we came across where this person is like living as if they're in like early colonial America. They're like badly doing everything that comes along with like roughing it out in the frontier, but it's like they're clearly like cosplaying.
And so on and so on. 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 And so on and so on.